Get the show started. As the spread of the coronavirus aggravates all over the world and activities are held down with lockdowns given by various governments so as to contain the spread, many have been forced to work from home. Yet many others who depend on a daily income are finding it difficult to cope with the compulsory lockdown. So, how are you coping? Like we asked at the beginning of the program, please send us videos, pictures, and let us know how you're coping with the lockdown. But to help us look at this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome here in Lagos Dr. Femi Ogunyemi, who is an anesthesiologist and an intensivist who works in the ICU, the intensive care unit. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Happy to be
And from Abuja, we have Professor Alashle Abimiku, Executive Director, International Research Center of Excellence, Institute of Human Virology, Nigeria. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Also from Abuja, we have Dr. Chris Isokunwu, Head of Nutrition, the Federal Ministry of Health. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Let me begin with you, sir. First of all, what is the difference between an anesthesiologist and an anesthetist?
It's just a question of nomenclature. In America, we are referred to as anesthesiologists.
Oh.
In England, we are referred to, and Nigeria, as anesthetists. We perform exactly the same functions.
Okay. And then what's an intensivist?
Intensivist is somebody who has specialized and is an expert in intensive care or critical care of very ill patients.
And we have a critical situation right now. But let me start with, again, staying with you. You're wearing the mask. Yes. That's been one area of conversation around.
Yes.
Don't wear the mask within this period, wear the mask within this period, wear it this way, wear it that way. Could you just clarify and then begin with why, first of all, you have it around your chin, you're not wearing it?
Well, first of all, I actually wore it in the vehicle all the way here. And we have keeping a social distance right here. So it is not, otherwise you won't hear me properly and people won't see me to understand what I'm saying. So I'm able to take it down because we're maintaining a social distance. The controversy is actually still raging. America has said something different. The United Kingdom, as of last night, this morning, they're saying something different. Initially, we were told we don't need to wear masks except you actually have an infection or you have symptoms. You don't want to transmit it to other people. If you didn't have any symptoms or you didn't have infection, it was not supposed to be protective. But the evidence, you know, this is a new virus. And as we gather data and new evidence, the thinking changes. So the CDC in the United States and the WHO, in the last few days, they've realized that talking, even breathing, can create some droplets, micro droplets, bigger droplets around you. And they've decided that it might be better to actually wear a mask, even if you don't have any symptoms, to protect the person close to you and to protect yourself. But it doesn't supersede social distancing. That is still the most important aspect. England doesn't agree with that. They are not wearing masks for everybody. Okay. There are pros and cons.
Okay. Something is about the mask. We're told that there's also a way of wearing the mask.
Yes.
The dark side should be one place and the lighter side should be another place.
Well, with the new guidelines, that controversy is over now because you don't actually have to wear a normal surgical mask like I'm wearing. You can actually use any clothing or material to protect to cover your face because we're now thinking about protecting from droplets. If everybody is wearing these masks, it's going to cause a shortage in the hospitals because this is what we have to wear in the hospitals. We can't wear a handkerchief or a bandana around our face. So they're concerned about if everybody's wearing this mask, there will be a shortage for healthcare workers in the hospitals. Now, when you do wear the mask, there's a way the filter in the mask is. So normally, there's a way you have to wear it to protect yourself from the coronavirus. We're dealing with the coronavirus, and it has its own filtering capabilities. The only group of mass that is being tested that will prevent the virus penetrating are the N95 masks. And that they're actually trying to restrict that as much as possible. We should be doing that for our healthcare workers.
Okay. Well, okay. Before we get to Abuja, so you said something about it, wearing the mask doesn't supersede social distancing.
Absolutely.
But then there's a conversation around self-quarantining and social distancing. What's the difference between the two?
You mean social distancing, I suppose. The problem is people misunderstand isolation, social distancing, and quarantine. There is a difference, a very slight difference. Isolation is where you try to remove people who have no symptoms from people who have symptoms.
Okay, please hold your thoughts there. When we come back, you carry on from that point. Removing people who have symptoms and those who don't have symptoms. Yes. We'll take it up from there in a moment. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We still have Dr. Femi Ogunyemi, Dr. Chris Sopun in Abuja, and Professor Lashley Abimiku. Dr. Ogunyemi, you were talking about separating those who are infected from those who are not.
Yes.
We're still trying to break down self-isolation, quarantining,
yeah,
and so social distancing.
Yeah, but isolation, as I said earlier, is when you take somebody who has no symptoms, is not been exposed, and you keep them away from somebody from the potential of getting infection or exposure. You isolate them. Isolation has no time limit. You can isolate for a month, for 2 months, for 3 years. That's isolation. Quarantine is a bit different. Quarantine is when you take somebody who has been exposed to the virus. They may not be showing symptoms, but they have been exposed. So you have to put them in quarantine for a period. That's a major difference. Quarantine has a period, depending on the incubation period of what they've been exposed to. For coronavirus, it's 14 days. For another organism or another bacteria or another virus, it may be 21 days, it may be 7 days. So quarantine has a time period. Isolation doesn't. That's the slight difference between the two. And both of them involve social distancing.
Okay, Dr. Abimiku, if I can bring it to you in Abuja, that idea of removing people who've been infected from those who are not infected, Dr. Geme has talked about it's for a certain time, as if you're quarantining. But the way viruses behave, how long would that time be in our current situation? Now we're talking about 2 weeks, but there are those who are talking about the fact that even after the 2 weeks, there's a likelihood that those things might show up again.
Sure, no, absolutely. I think that's an important point. Viruses do linger in the body for a long period of time, even when they're outside your body, as long as they are in droplets and in a kind of substance that allow them to survive. They can survive for a long period of time. So most of the guidance that we're getting from WHO, CDC, and our own government is based on the average time lag in terms of all the information we know about the viruses. So that's why if you look at the guidance in terms of how we protect ourselves, it's layer over layer. Your guest in Lagos has talked about the social distancing, and even when you're wearing a mask, you're supposed to observe that, right? Because viruses act differently, and they have the capability in the right environment to survive for much longer than the average period of time. There are individuals that have been found to have the virus even after 27 days, although they say that the incubation period is only about 14 days. So yes, there is the norm, but usually, very often, there are circumstances around the case that takes it beyond the norm so that the virus is surviving for a long period of time. So we must continue to practice social distancing and wear masks when we in a position where we can't do that. Maybe we have to go out for a period of time, get stuff from the store and stuff like that, wear masks to protect ourselves. And then if you know you're infected, practice all the other things that we talk about. Make sure that you protect individuals around you, you up your hygiene. All of us need to up our hygiene and all of that, because the virus, it really depends on the circumstances around the viruses. So you've heard about the fact that the lifetime of the virus varies based on the surfaces that they are on. And based on the information that we have now, the metallic surfaces are one that they survive most for the longest period of time. So again, we really cannot take any chances at all. We have to wash our hands, as we've been advised. When we touch surfaces that we are not, when we touch surfaces in general, and apply the sanitizer as well when we're not sure of the areas that we're in.
Dr. Chris, let me bring this to you now. We're talking about social distancing, but in many parts of our country, people are living, well, should I say, in clusters. For instance, these face me, I face you, and people who live in the rural areas, they're living in close proximity, one next to the other. So how practical is that in those circumstances?
Well, nobody says it's going to be easy, but if it's going to save your life and your life depends on it, you do as much as possible to maintain that distance. It's not just to protect yourself, it's to protect those around you. Your guest in the studio had talked about creating a barrier. The whole essence is if you are getting too close to somebody, then create a barrier between your face and the other person's face. So that's where it becomes possible. It's become important that you use a face mask within that at that particular period that you are unable to maintain that social distance, that distance of about 2 meters from somebody. But that again is one of the reasons why people are advised to stay indoors. Stay in your house, stay among people who have not been exposed. If you are not outside your house or outside your room, like in the case of the face me, I face you talked about, you are not likely to be exposed to somebody who is already infected. And if you've already been exposed and you are staying indoors, you keep it within your own confine and do not then transmit it to others.
Dr. Chris, how easy is it for a man, his wife, and 4 children who live in a room in a face me, I face you, where there are 10 other rooms and probably an equal number of persons in the family? They share one kitchen, they share one bathroom. I mean, how are they going to socially distance from each other?
Unfortunately, those are circumstances that really we have to cope with. But another thing is that people can spend more time in the open. When you are outside in the premises, then you are able to create that distance and that space between you and the other person. Nobody says it's easy. But this is a circumstance that we are presented with, and we have to do our best to make sure we maintain that distance. Now, for a family that live in one room, a man, his wife, and 4 children, if the important thing then is for them to restrain their exposure to people who are outside within their vicinity. We assume in that case, for example, they've not been exposed. Nobody in that family has been exposed. And so keeping your distance from people from the other family who probably went out. I'll give you an example. You are staying in your house. Your neighbor goes out to the market, meets with everybody who's been infected, or meets with everybody in the market and comes in contact with somebody who's been exposed to the virus and comes back to the house, and you leave your room to interact with that person without maintaining that social distance, you stand the risk of being exposed yourself and then taking it into your house. Then the second thing is when you go out and you are you couldn't exactly maintain that distance, try as much as possible that before you get back into your house, you wash your hands, especially when your hands have been in contact with some surfaces that have been touched by a lot of other people. Wash your hands before you get back into your house.
Okay, Dr. Chris, staying with you, in this period, the question of nutrition comes into play. While we're self-isolating, washing hands, there is some kind of food that could help the immune system. And for some, it might not even be available. So what do you advise people should be feeding on? What kind of diet should people have at this time?
Well, we advocate, what we always talk about is adequate nutrition, adequate diet. Now, it varies from age group to age group. For children, for infants, especially those that are less than 6 months, they are to depend solely on their mother's breast milk, which means they should be exclusively breastfed. No water, no liquid, nothing else, just the breast milk. And when the child is above over 6 months, between 6 months and 2 years, they are introduced to complementary feeding, but with continued breastfeeding. In that instance, the complementary feeding again should be adequate. Children are to be fed in the appropriate frequency. Children 6 months to 9 months, for example, should have two to three meals along with breast milk, and those from 9 to 23 months should have 3 to 4 meals per day along with breast milk. Now, for the complementary food, there should be a variety in order to ensure that the child gets the right nutrient that can boost the child's immunity. And we usually talk about the 7 food groups. All our foods can be classified into these groups, and a child or even an adult should ensure that his own meal, his or her meal, is sourced from at least 4 of those 7 food groups per day. Now, the 7 food groups classification are when you talk about grains, roots, and tubers, which are generally the basis for our staples. You have the legumes and nuts as the second group. You have milk as a group of its own. Egg is also a group of its own. Milk and dairy products together, then egg is a group of its own. Then for fruits and vegetables, we classify them into 2. The vitamin A-rich fruits and vegetables, those are those orange-colored fruits and vegetables like tomato, carrot, some mangoes, and then other fruits and vegetables. And then you have the 7th group, which is fleshy foods. Every form of flesh, meat, fish, snail, insects, crayfish, they all come under that group. So those 7 food groups. On the average, the child, the mother, the parents should have their meals sourced from at least 4 of those food groups. They don't have to be expensive. Let me give you a simple recipe. For example, a woman who prepares pap for the child, prepares pap. Pap is from the group 1, and then the child feeds it with moi moi or with beans. Moi moi is from group 2, and then there's milk and the pap if she can afford that. If she cannot afford that, she has blended crayfish in that meal. She already have 3 food groups in just one meal. And the next meal she could have another variety again, and then she adds fruits and vegetables in it. She already had 4 food groups, and that is adequate for the child for the day. But in terms of adequacy, the quantity is also very important. You don't give a child a drop of fruit juice and you think that you're giving him from that group. It should be a minimum of at least a spoonful, if, for example, if it's a liquid or it's a powdery form, before you say that is adequate for the child for the day. For the adults, you just have to increase that. Another thing is that during this period, people are advised to ensure adequate hydration. On the average, an average adult needs to take about 3 liters of water per day, and they should ensure that they are adequately hydrated. But most importantly, especially in the areas where you have this lockdown and you are forced to stay indoors, one should actually ensure adequate diet, proper sleep. You should have between 6 to 8 hours of sleep per day, as much as you can. And very importantly, physical exercise. As much as possible, take advantage of your staying in house. Don't remain indoors just watching TV. Come out, play games. We've seen a lot of people giving us examples of how they've been whiling away their time. But physical exercise is really very important. It's part of a way of staying alive and staying healthy, especially at this period.
All right, thank you. Dr. Abimiku, Prof, that idea of physical exercise and a viral infection, does it work together? Someone actually said, I overheard a conversation where he was saying, if you have any infection whatsoever, as you exercise, you tend to get to notice it faster than if you don't exercise. Does that apply?
No, absolutely. I think that, you know, especially in the case of viruses, there are very few viruses that you actually have drugs that are effective against them. In the newer age, we've found viruses like the HIV, that there's actually an antiretroviral that you can take, and that keeps the virus at bay. But for most viral infection, what helps an individual overcome that infection is your immune system. And your immune system is as good as the nutrition you have in your body and the exercises. It depends on how healthy you are. So we can see, for instance, during this coronavirus pandemic, that individuals that are healthy, they are practicing well, they're eating well, they're sleeping well. The young ones with a very robust immune system do much better than those that are elderly, because then your immune system is a little more fragile, or if you have underlying diseases that compromise your immune system. So all of this really goes together. We've got to eat well, we've got to exercise, and we've got to make sure that we rest well, because that's how you boost your immune system, and you are able to overcome viral infections. So you can, for instance, in a household, and this always happens to me, where like within a household, you all get the common cold, and a few get it for a couple of days and they're fine. Some others get it for much longer. It develops into a cough, and then it drags on. And most of the time, the difference is probably in age, but most likely in how fit they are, who is doing the right thing in terms of exercising. I, for one, really believe in having juices that are very healthy. So my juice in the morning includes cucumber, includes ginger, includes carrots, and stuff like that, irrespective of whether there's a pandemic or not. And I have noticed that in the few years that I've started introducing that as a normal practice, I've had fewer colds. So they all go together, and it makes absolute sense that you practice all of that.
All
And
right.
Dr. Guyami, we have heard that this virus survives for various lengths of time depending on what surface it's on. So can you just explain all of that to us? Say on wood, for instance, on fabric, for instance, on metal, for instance, how long would it last on surfaces that we touch most of the time?
That's a very good question. First of all, you know, the virus is not a living organism. It's just a protein that's wearing a very deceptive coat of what we call nucleic acid. It becomes a living organism when it gets inside a living cell. So what you find lying on wood, on fabric, in hair, are just proteins. Now, we still don't know, the data is not out yet, why it lives longer on certain surfaces. But clearly, if as the professor said earlier, metal, stainless steel, has been found to harbor it for longer, for days, in fact, up to 6 days. Clothing.
Ouch. 6 days.
Yes, ma'am. That's about the longest. It can stay in the air around you for a few hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. We don't know yet how much it stays when you're just breathing or talking. It can stay on wood for maybe a day or two, but the longest is metal.
All right, we'll just go for a moment and come back to tidy up on that aspect of the conversation. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Dr. Gemi, you were trying to tidy up on the particular question they were asked about surfaces where this
Yes.
where these viruses tend to, and how long they dwell on these surfaces. Last week when we were discussing this matter, someone asked a question about money. How long does it survive on money? Because money is paper.
Yes.
So how long does the virus survive on money? Maybe we should take that to Professor Abimiku to help us answer that question. We'll still come back to you, Professor Abimiku, but let Dr. Guyemi finish here. How long does it survive on money? And what do we do with the monies that because we exchange monies every day?
Well, I hesitate to ask you to sanitize your cash. But yes, it does. The question is paper. It does survive on paper for hours. I think data should suggest maybe up to a day or so. I'm not quite sure the current day. You know, we keep gathering new information, but at least a day, maybe more, maybe less. It varies, but it does survive on paper. You know, this is not the most lethal of viruses when it comes to being contagious. The hepatitis C virus can survive on paper for up to 2 weeks.
And that's wicked.
Yes. So in my practice in anesthesia and operative practice, we have to be careful being exposed to blood surfaces and all that, because a drop of blood on a piece of paper harboring hepatitis C can be there for the next 10 to 14 days. You know. So yes, what do we do about it on cash? Well, I hate to predict what will happen with cash eventually, but it may have to, if we find a resurge after this pandemic is over and we keep finding underlying infection, they might look at what they're going to do about transmission on cash.
We really need to look at that cashless policy thing that
Yes,
we're
absolutely.
talking about a great deal. Professor Abimiku, the matter of survival on surfaces and cash handling, what do you advise?
Yeah, so that's a really important point. And I agree with you. We're looking to the days when we will be a cashless society, because it has its advantage in so many ways, in more than one way. But honestly, we do know, as a matter of fact, that transmission happens as a result of even handling bills, especially some really crummy bills that we have around here. So what I would advise individuals is that, yes, this virus will have the capability of surviving. How long it survives, we really don't know. And again, it really would vary in terms of the droplet that it's protecting this virus. And if it is a very rich droplet that has proteins in it, it survives for a long period of time. If it is a droplet that is very small and doesn't have a lot of mucus or whatever around it, then it survives for a period of time. But what I would advise my fellow Nigerians is that when you handle money, you make sure that before you do anything at all, you wash your hands as you're supposed to, or you use a sanitizer. Use sanitizer as much as you can. You know, there are little bottles that people can take along with them, and for me, it has really become a habit. I open the door handle, you know, and I get into a car, put a little dash of sanitizer. I rub it on my hands, I get out and hold all the surfaces. Same thing with paper, you know, with the money. If you have to deal with with currency, you cannot assume that there aren't there isn't COVID-19 on it or other infection. So what one can do is before you do anything else, you wash your hands very carefully after you've handled that money, or you use the sanitizer is probably more practicable than water because you don't always have water and soap available.
Now, this right here is Dr. Ogunyemi's sanitizer, which he carries around. And he just told us that we were sharing a sanitizer in the studio and we were both pressing on it. And that is not safe, he said. So I'm sure he's going to sanitize this because I have touched it. Yes, so Prof, at the time of Ebola, we noticed that the deceased were being cremated. What is happening in the case of those dying from the COVID-19?
At the moment, we know that different countries have different practices right now based on the individuals, based on the volume of the dead persons that they're dealing with. And some of it is really sad, where they have a mass graveyard and really big holes that they throw the bodies into. But I believe that the individuals in the mug that have to deal with the dead bodies of individuals that die from coronavirus are at risk. So they have to wear all the gowns, they have to wear the mask, they have to wear the shield, because they don't want any of the substances, the fluid from that dead body to get to any of the surfaces that can infect them. So the long and short of it is that unfortunately dead bodies are still infectious. If you get any of the fluids within the dead body onto you, it's a big risk. So, but if the body is already embalmed in one way or the other, then there's no reason why individuals cannot bury their dead and pay respect to their dead as well. I know that one of the reasons that is discouraged is, again, it violates the distancing because you tend to bring crowd together, and so the social distancing is a little difficult to practice and stuff like that. So different countries are doing different things, but we have to treat the dead body very, very carefully because within the fluids, the virus still exists and can still infect. As you rightly pointed out, during Ebola, the bodies were cremated because Ebola was really dangerous in the sense that one of its manifestation is that the patient actually exudes all this fluid and blood coming from all the openings. So it's really the fluids are not contained at all. It's highly, highly, highly infectious. In the case of corona, it's not like that. You know, you don't have the fluids and the bleeding and everything that you see in Ebola, but the dead bodies have to be handled very carefully. And the other thing that we have to do, as our guest in Lagos has been sharing with us, is data that is coming from a number of countries, from Europe, from US, from China. We've got to be very careful and make sure that we set up the processes. I mentioned this the last time I was on your channel, that Nigeria really needs to begin to set up the processes that allows them to do their own research. And we're able to get the information that we can share with the rest of the world. Right now, the research that's going on in other parts of the world is really informing us, thank God, on how we address this issue. But there are some subtle differences that we have here. And we have to think about the opportunity to go back and really see what do we know about this virus, and how better can we handle it. Knowing viruses, they have a cycle, right? So like the flu virus, comes back every winter, every Hamilton period in our case. And if you heard Dr. Fauci on CNN, he's already talking about how the United States should gear up for another round of coronavirus, probably in autumn. So you know, having the capacity to actually conduct research and understand the virus within our own circumstance is highly, highly critical and important.
Yeah, Prof, staying with you, can a person be reinfected? Like some of those who have been discharged from isolation centers or from those who have recovered from the virus, can they get it again?
Yeah, no, an excellent, excellent question. The way viruses behave, it's very probable that an individual that recovers can get infected again. That's why, for research, we have to understand how our body copes with the virus. So if I'm infected with COVID-19 and I recover for it, the only thing that, apart from practicing all of the preventive measures, the one thing that will prevent me from being infected again is the fact that my body has seen this virus and has the ability or has had the ability to mount up an immune response so that the next time it sees it, because every time we get infected with a virus, it's a fight. Your body is trying to be above the virus is trying to multiply to hit your body. So you succumb to symptoms when eventually your immune system is not able to get rid of the virus. So the fact of the matter is, once you're infected with a virus, you mount up the appropriate immune response. The expectation is when your body sees that virus again a second time, it is primed and it recognizes it and it's got all its immune system that are already primed. So it doesn't have to start from scratch. It's got to say, oh, I understand this is foreign. And the response is much, much rapid than when it sees the virus for the first time. So the likelihood that somebody that has recovered from COVID-19, the likelihood of that individual to be exposed to COVID-19 is there. But the benefit that individual has is the fact that its body, that person's body, it's in a better state to fight the virus. And it's possible that that person will be infected, but may not come down with the disease and all of the symptoms. So that person could possibly, the second round, be asymptomatic, which means that he's able to deal with the virus and not succumb to it. But that person could spread the virus as well. So it's a very complicated issue. But you know, it's highly, highly important, especially against virus infections, that you take care of your body because your body is going to do the trick for you.
Okay. Dr. Okunyemi, you were going to add something?
Yes, the professor has made a very good exposition in an answer to your question. There is some good news. When viruses come back to reinfect, they mutate, they change their coats, they come in a disguise. And this is why we keep getting colds all the time. Mm-hmm. And even though we have a flu vaccine, people still getting flu, even if they have the vaccine, because the virus can mutate, can change. The good news is that as of now, we're still working on this coronavirus, this COVID-19. As of now, when they have studied the virus from China all around to where it is now, it remains the same. It hasn't been mutating at all. That's good news, because it means if they do have eventually, which we will, get a vaccine to give us the immune response to it, the chances of reinfection is there, but it's not that great because it's going to stay the same, and we'll be able to target it. That's just a little good news to what the professor has explained.
Dr. Chris, Let me bring this to you. Now, how vulnerable are pregnant women? And do we have any information regarding infection of the fetus in their stomachs?
Thank you. There is, as far as I know, there is no extra vulnerability conferred on the pregnant woman. However, there is also no evidence that coronavirus can be transmitted to the unborn child. The reports and all the evidence available shows that an infected mother can actually have a child who is not infected. So in direct answer to your question, the answers are: one, there is no evidence that a pregnant woman has an undue vulnerability, and two, an infected mother cannot transmit the virus to her unborn child.
Dr. Guyemi, somebody has said here that he disinfects all the notes that he did, that he's not taking any chances. And, oh yes, viewers, like I said, while Professor was talking, Dr. Guyemi did pick up his sanitizer, which I'm not going to touch again. And he did sanitize it because I had touched it. So you can't be too careful. Like I was saying to him during the break, I saw something on social media, some vox pop of people saying, oh, coronavirus is a disease for the rich. It can't catch us, poor people. Please, Dr. Guyemi, I want your comment on that kind of
thinking.
It's a gross misconception. The virus knows no gender, no socioeconomic status, no political leaning, no ethnicity or tribal group. Remember what I said. It is just an inanimate object. It's just a structure, a protein that comes alive when it gets into a living cell. So that's a misconception.
Oh, by the way, you didn't say about how long it lives on fabric.
Well, you know, we're not sure of these things. But
Yes.
again, on cloth, it can be 12 hours, a day, a couple of days. I think some of the data I've seen, I've said up to 3 days. It can
Okay.
even be in hair. The virus can attach to hair. But the current evidence says that it doesn't stay in hair very long. I know, maybe less than an hour or two. They are
Okay.
working on all these things. We don't know why there are these time differences.
Is that why you therefore advise that when we go out, upon getting back in the house, we should put all our clothing, including our shoes, out in the sun for a few hours?
Well, they should really ideally be disinfected because the sun is not going to really do much destruction on
So
those items.
you wash them in
Well,
hot
you
water
wash
or
them,
something?
but the prevention is better than the cure. Keep away. Don't go out.
No,
Keep your social
if
distance.
you have to go to the market, for instance,
Right.
and you get back home, what
Yes.
do you do?
Wash your hands, remove your clothes, wash your clothes.
Wash, please, what's the procedure? Remove the clothes before you wash your hands, or wash your hands, remove the clothes, then go back and wash your hands again. Because what some people do is
Yes.
wash the hands,
Yes.
remove the clothes,
Okay.
take a bath,
Right.
Yeah.
change.
Right.
But in all of that, when they remove the clothes, they leave them, take a bath, then they come back and pick the clothes again. I
That
think
is
that's
true.
contrary to the idea of
That is true. The most important thing when you come back from outside is to wash your hands. If you don't have running water, hopefully you have sanitizers, which brings the matter of poor people getting access to preventive measures. We have to give our sanitizers and things. If they don't, many Nigerians do not have running water. To me, that's the most important thing. As far as clothes, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. At the end of the day, when you do wash your clothes, most of the washing materials, the washing liquid, the chemicals, most of them have chlorine in them. And chlorine dioxide, sodium hypochlorite has been shown. In fact, that's what we use in disinfecting buildings and offices and things like that. It's chlorine-based products. So washing will help. Washing will help, but it's a tough thing to prevent.
Okay, we'll take another break. When we come back, we'll be looking at, is all hope lost? What's the hope ahead? What should people be thinking about at this time? We've had all the news of what this can do and what you should be doing, but what is the light at the end of the tunnel? But that'll be in a moment. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We still have our guests in the studio in Lagos and Abuja, and I'll come straight to you, Dr. Chris. Right now we're talking about the light at the end of the tunnel. In terms, actually, the question we were talking earlier, you talked about nutrition, you talked about the kind of foods to eat. What should we be doing now? People talk about vitamin C, multivitamins, the low-hanging fruits. What should people be doing now?
Well, the most important thing people should be doing, and which is something that we downplay a lot, is keeping your hands away from your face. That is the whole essence of washing the hands. On the average, our hands touch our face 23 times per hour. That's quite a lot of times. And so, and it is when the hands carry the virus to your face, your nose, your mouth, your eyes, the mucous membranes around the face, that is when one gets infected. So as much as possible, avoid your hands getting to your face. 2, adequate nutrition, like I said, it's the way to go. There is no need going about food supplements. There are a lot of those food supplements, immune boosters that are in the market and are sold at exorbitant prices, going for vitamin C and all of that. It's to eat adequately. I like the recipe the prof mentioned earlier, that she takes cucumber juice, carrot, and the likes in the morning. The first thing that crossed my mind was carrot and cucumber are from 2 food groups already, and that's a way to go. People should focus on using available fruits and vegetables around their environment. Those will help in boosting their immunity. Exercise, one cannot emphasize that enough. Physical exercise is very important. Avoid sedentary lifestyle, sitting in one place, taking a walk even around your compound, ensuring that there is that social distancing is critical. I must say that there is hope. The hope is there that if we do get it right, if we follow the right instructions that government is putting forth, ensure social distancing, stay indoors if you don't have to go out, or only go out when you need to. Avoid contacts with people. Eat right. Rest properly. And most importantly, keep your hands from your face. There is a very slim, if you do all of these, there's a very slim chance of you getting down with corona, the COVID disease.
Professor Abimiku, that touching of the face 23 times a day is a tough one. I know some people that do it more than the 23 times. So when that happens, is all hope lost? What do you advise?
Okay. Well, the most important thing is wash your hands, because we know that we cannot avoid touching our faces. As a matter of fact, I didn't say 23 times a day, I said 23 times an hour. So in a day, therefore, when you are not asleep, you do that a lot more. So it's 23 times an hour. That's almost like once every 2 minutes. So the most important thing, therefore, because you can't exactly restrain yourself from touching your face, is always to keep your hands clean. So anytime you touch a surface that has been touched by a lot of people, wash your hands with soap and water. That is the most important one. Not everybody, oh, how can I get sanitizers? Sanitizers are even becoming very expensive now. It is wash your hands with soap and water. Clean those frequently touched surfaces in your house with just, even again, soap and water. And if you can afford bleach, use bleach and clean all those frequently touched surfaces in your house. Anytime you go out, before you get back into your house, wash your hands with soap and water, and let the soap lather in your hand and wash it for at least 20 seconds before you rinse with water. As much as possible, even as much as you are keeping your hands clean, avoid your hands from touching your face. And this is the mistake many of our people make. Some people wear gloves and then they touch everywhere, every surface they like because they think they are wearing gloves, and then they use the gloved hand to touch their face. My dear, it's as good as not even wearing the glove, because the gloves will transfer the virus to your face and then you breathe it in, and that's when one gets infected. So as much as possible, keep your hands clean, washed as often as you can. You can't wash your hands enough, and then reduce the number of times your hands touch your face.
As much as possible. Professor Abimiku, what's your advice?
So I think that we should continue to do what has been advised, and I don't have to repeat it again. I think people have heard that several times. In terms of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I think that we have to brace ourselves that it might get worse before it gets better. And my advice has always been that Nigerians are very resourceful. Let us look inwards and make sure that we have the individuals that are able to help the country provide all of the gears that we need. I've said at your channel before, and I'll say it again, I think every state must have a testing laboratory, because until we know the extent of this infection, we really will not be able to control it. So I think we're going towards the right direction. I just hope that the government and the good people of Nigeria that have come to assist the efforts of the government don't take their foot off the pedal, because it really has to get worse before it gets better. So at best, we practice all the preventive measures, but we make sure also that we can take care of individuals that get sick. And more importantly, be very cognizant of the vulnerable people among us, the grandma and the grandpa, and be very careful of the elderly when we go close to them, because they are very vulnerable. I think if we do all of this right, and if we're ready, if the government really puts in all of the effort that we require to be ready for the additional cases that we're going to get, I think overnight we got the largest increase, 25 individuals that are infected. So we know this virus continues to increase in terms of infecting and suddenly shoots up. So let's continue to prepare as a nation and look within us for all of the talents that we have to help us get the right number of ventilators and masks. I'm glad that other nations are coming to assist us, but it may not be enough. We're a large, large nation, and we really should continue to prepare for the worst. And so that way we'll be ready when it hits, and the light at the end of the tunnel will come sooner.
Okay, Professor, Prof, let me ask you this question. Michael Abbas wants to know, how vulnerable are those living with sickle cell to this? What are their chances of beating it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think sickle cell, individuals with sickle cell have anemia. So, you know, there is a little bit of compromise in terms of their state. But I don't expect the reason why they're very vulnerable to other infections like malaria is that it attacks the red blood cells that they need. This virus, we know, does not necessarily infect the red blood cells. So I think that they probably have to be careful, but there's no reason why they weren't doing everything that they're supposed to do to build their immune system. They cannot defeat this virus. I don't think that they are necessarily over susceptible to the virus.
Dr.
Thank you.
Miami, Dr. Miami, do you see our lives returning to normal? And I mean normal as we knew it before last month.
In all honesty, no, I don't. There is a strong possibility this virus may linger. I'm not sure we'll be able to wipe it off the face of the earth. But clearly we have seen from the social distancing, the isolation, that things might change. For instance, our lifestyle, in particular in my own field, in health, we may start seeing more telemedicine, where the doctor doesn't have to be at your bedside. You don't have to be in the doctor's clinic to be seen and treated. That's already happening in the United States. And the Medicare, the paying arm of the government, is already funding and paying for it. So that's going to be a trend, especially needed also in our part of the world, here in Nigeria. We're going to start seeing more focus on family care. And we're going to find that, just like we were discussing earlier about certain drugs and vaccines, there's going to be a bigger role for government to play when it comes to control of pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, and things like that. That's already, people are looking at that. Mm-hmm. If we look at our lifestyle, the question of your personal space is now kind of important. You can't just somebody can't just violate your space. Mm-hmm. And that's going to linger with us as we move forward.
What about our social life? We're party animals.
Well,
you know, we love to get together and jolly, as they say.
Yeah, well, continue to maintain. We're going to continue maintaining all the preventive measures of washing hands, of using sanitizers. People might start going to restaurants might become less. Communal dining might become less. People might start using parks and open spaces a bit more, you know. Those are part of the way we worship.
Parks in Nigeria.
Well, yes, well, in Nigeria, true, but there's still some spaces, some open spaces. Mm-hmm. So,
now, let me put this to you. So you specialize in pain, sort of.
Yes, I
handling
do.
Pain. There are those who've had relatives already impacted by this, yes. And they are also impacted.
Yes.
But what would you advise in terms of handling the pain?
The mental pain or the physical pain?
I leave that to you. Mentally, physically, emotionally. What would you advise?
Physical pain, routine analgesics, paracetamol. Stay away from anti-inflammatory, Advil, ibuprofen, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Stay away from those. Just good old paracetamol and other measures you take if you had a cold. That's the physical pain. The emotional pain, that's going to be difficult because it's individualized. Each person's emotional response to this crisis is going to be different from the next. The way a wealthy person might respond will be different from how a poor person might respond. Well, counseling, talking, interacting with your loved one that may have symptoms or may be infected, being hopeful. There is hope here. You mentioned hope earlier on. I do believe, I mean, we've already mapped the genetic code of this virus, and there's no doubt in my mind the scientists will get the right modality to deal with it. There is no doubt in my mind. It's just a matter of time. So there is hope, and people should not be despairing too much about this virus. Some people are feeling depression, mild depression, neurotic, reactive depression, to being isolated and being unable to socialize and go to parties and go out and interact with people. The elderly in particular, because we know they're so vulnerable, some of them are already showing some mild. I've got some calls from some people. My mother, my grandmother, she's been crying, she's been upset about what's going on in the world. The best thing we can do is to reassure them and to encourage them and to show them the positive things that are still around. There's so many positive things around us. People who have access to social media, there's a lot of misinformation, conspiracy theories, wrong information, untrue, scary stuff on the media, in the social media, and people just have to avoid them and stick to the positive and encouraging things. And like with your other guest said, good nutrition, good exercise, good feeling of well-being, all that will affect your mental health.
What about again, the question of fear? There are those who are afraid of going to the isolation centers. There are those who are, indeed, some people are even afraid, even when they must step out of their doors. They are afraid to even step outside. That question of fear,
Yeah.
what do we do? What's your advice?
Education. Fear is also part of not knowing. I just touched my face.
You just touched your face. Well, fortunately for you, you
You've
haven't
been
done that in the last 1
sanitizing, you've been
hour.
sanitizing your fingers, so it's okay.
How do you conquer fear of anything? You expose yourself.
Face it.
You face the fear. If you take fear of cockroaches, fear of rats, to treat it, you face it. That's one way. There's also something we call gradual desensitization. You expose yourself bit by bit to the cockroach or to the fear, the object that you fear, the phobia. So if somebody has these fears that you're saying, they have to face it. Why? They have to try and understand, why are you having this fear? We can help by public health education, educating people that they will have these feelings of fear. This is what they should do. Confront it, overcome it. Education and just general belief in yourself. Looking at the positive things. There's still positive things, like I said. And the importance of exercise, the importance of good nutrition, and all those things is all part of it as well.
Professor Abimiku, one last one. There's someone who's asking that a total lockdown, not the partial lockdown as it is now, that a total lockdown of the nation is the best advice at this point in time. Do you agree?
Well, you know, based on the model that we have to work with, if you look at China and India, they did do that, and it showed good results. The total lockdown for a period of time to just prevent the transmission. But also we've seen countries that have practiced partial lockdown. But you know, when you do partial lockdown and you don't do social distancing and you don't wash your hands and you don't do all of that, for a populous country like Nigeria, I can see how partial lockdown might be a problem, because even within that period of time, you're unable to practice the social distancing, which so far has been something that has worked significantly. On the other side, we're dealing with a population that you really can't do total lockdown because they don't have electricity. So they cannot stock up for the period of time that you want to lock down for, usually about a week or 2 weeks. So it's a real conundrum, and it will require a number of experts to come together and deal with the challenges. If we can deal with the challenges that people face for a virus to be limited in its ability to transmit from one person to the other, a total lockdown is the answer.
Now, very quickly, Dr. Chris, before you go, somebody sent a message saying you said we should eat fruits, but how do you sanitize fruits, like apples and carrots?
You just wash your fruits and vegetables thoroughly before you consume them. There is no you don't have to go washing it with soap and water, if that's what you mean. But it's just to wash them thoroughly with clean water before you consume them. But I cannot emphasize enough that these fruits and vegetables, along with your stable food in the right proportion, provides you with, enables your body to build the required immunity to resist the infection, even when one is, well, we don't pray for that, when one gets it. So the right way to go is wash whatever you take in anyway, wash it thoroughly with very clean water. And in many cases, we advise running water. But if you do not have running water, you have clean water, let it run. Running water actually doesn't mean it has to come from the tap. It's for the water to be flowing while you are doing the washing so that it flows away. If you put water in a bowl and you are washing in the bowl, you are in there again washing with inside the dirty water that's coming from your hand. That's why we say running water. It doesn't mean it has to be from the tap.
All right,
Thank you.
Dr. Guyemi, going to the salon, what's the advice at this period?
To the salon.
Yes,
Barbing salon.
barbing salon, to even the women that go to the salon. What's your advice?
Well, how do you go to the salon and maintain social distancing?
How do you get your hair cut from the social? Would they have to use a pole and?
That's a difficult. This is what the professor was explaining about a lockdown and social distancing. It's very hard to do. But here's the deal. We have to do it. Don't go.
Stay alive.
To say we have to lock down. We have to. It's more difficult for a country where you have individual rights, freedom of movement. It's been difficult to implement it in the United States. It's been done piecemeal. It's been difficult to implement it in England. Italy had to clamp down to get a lockdown. It was easier in a place like China. We really have to give up, make some sacrifices, and stay home. There's no point being dead and having a nice shaved haircut. So those are part of the sacrifices, really. People have to understand things are not the same. You got to stay home. Let your hair grow. Use the scissors at home.
Thank you very much. Oh, that was very enlightening. Dr. Femi Ogunyemi, anesthesiologist and intensivist, who was with us in Lagos, and Dr. Chris Isokun, head of nutrition, Federal Ministry of Health, as well as Professor Alashle Abimiku, executive director, International Research Center of Excellence, Institute of Human Virology, Nigeria, both of whom joined us from our studios in Abuja. Thank you all very much for coming to enlighten us this morning. Sunrise will return with another COVID-19 topic in just a moment. Stay with us.